The lips of wisdom are closed, except to the ears of understanding.
What's up, everybody? Thank you so much for joining us and joining me and all my guests again at the Living Lilith podcast. I am your hostess and producer, Griselda Pacheco. Good to see you guys. I'm very excited that you decide to tune in. So thanks. We're really lucky today. We're always lucky with my people. I love my people, so I always get excited when they want to have a conversation on my podcast. So here is my wonderful and glorious, beautiful friend, Shanna Cross. She is a wonderful astrologer. I mean, when I say wonderful, she is very scientific and intuitive at the same time. Her readings and her interpretations are so accurate. She also was my first student ever, like 500,000 years ago.
Exactly.
It seems like it, right? 500,000 years. So there's so much specialness going on here that I'm just really excited to have Shanna with us. So thank you for joining us here at the Living Lilith. In fact, Shanna is the person who said that I should call this the Living Lilith podcast. This was her idea. And what a really wonderful title. It seems like it was something that was obvious, but it clearly was not, right? Obvious. It was obvious, but you saw it. So awesome to have you here, Shanna, for all those reasons.
Thank you so much. That was a glorious welcome.
Well, I mean, I think this is really powerful to talk about what we are going to talk about today, everybody. And that is the symbolism of what is about to occur tomorrow. We're recording this on Wednesday, and Thursday, the 23rd, is tomorrow the 23rd?
Yep, tomorrow's the 23rd.
So we're recording this on the 22nd, Wednesday, and the 23rd, tomorrow, Pluto enters Aquarius. And I feel like this is a major auspicious event. Clearly, a lot of astrologers agree, and a lot of people understand that that symbolically is a powerful time and event. So I wanted to bring her on so we can talk about it, because it is entering, and some of you guys have noticed my branding is very dystopian cyberpunk, because I've seen for a long time that this was coming in my own way of seeing, not through astrological symbols, but in my own way of understanding of the spiritual symbolism that's going on all around us, right? So today we're going to talk about this astrologically. So yeah, tell us about, first of all, the essence and nature of Pluto, the essence and nature of Aquarius, and the combining as a result what that really means. So let's talk about them like that.
So Pluto, as you know, the symbolism of Pluto in astrology is very much, it's Phoenix energy, right? It's you burn everything down like completely, right?
Yeah.
Burn it all to the ground where there's this giant gaping hole, right? And rebuild it.
Huh.
That's
and why is that though? Why does Pluto represent that?
Because Pluto is, well, for one, like if we look at it astronomically, it's the furthest planet from us, right? It's way out there. And so it represents the deep unconscious. We discovered Pluto around the time that Freud, Jung, right? All the
Mm.
deep psychology people were coming out, right? It was 1930 when Pluto was discovered.
I was gonna say it wasn't that long ago that the planet
No.
itself was
Yeah.
actually discovered.
Right. So and Pluto gets its association with, you know, when a planet is discovered, they look at what's going on in society. They look at what's going on with culture specifically. And so at the time, we had the deep Freudian psychology and the Jungian psychology emerging, right? The
Right.
Wilhelm Reich of the world, all of it.
Right.
And the atom bomb and the hydrogen bomb were created around this time that Pluto was discovered. So another way to completely annihilate life as we know it and start over, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So there's that symbology there as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so from there, astrologers took and looked at Pluto and watched historically where it was, because you can extrapolate where Pluto is at roughly what time, because it does have, you know, an elliptical orbit. It is steady with its movements. So
Uh-huh.
you can look and see what's going on. And they found that Pluto is a planet of complete revolution from the inside out, right?
Right.
So wherever Pluto is where it will completely transform what's going on.
So for people who are watching this who have no idea what you're talking about in terms of like, what does it matter that Pluto was found? I mean, it's just all coincidence, right? And people who maybe, or maybe they're skeptical, but then maybe some are curious and they just don't understand how astrology comes up with these correlations, right? So
Yeah.
so can you talk about a little bit, if you were speaking to a novice about this, what are you talking about?
So
Like, what does that matter when Pluto or any planet is found, or what it is they're doing, when and where, and all of that jazz?
it's correspondence, right? And it actually relates back to your course, the Hermetic Principles, right?
Mhm.
You know, the foundation of what you
Right.
teach.
The
So
law
it's
of correspondence.
yeah, as above, so below. And
Mhm.
so when we're talking about a planet like Pluto, right? The significations come from what's going on around the time of discovery. So when we discovered it, this is what's going on. Nothing is coincidence, nothing is chance, right? Everything is just part of the law, even though the law is not recognized.
Right, right. Well, and see, and that's the stuff that it gets very existential, and until and unless people start to really dig into these symbols, can they then possibly begin to understand what it is that you're talking about, in particular when it comes to astrology too. I always tell people, and they think, well, math is full of symbols.
Yeah.
That's a symbolic language, math. And yeah, we can compute things and use math to then say, oh yeah, but the thing about math is that it can equal into something else that we can see that has materialized or is materializing on the planet, or somehow in a way that we can interpret it with our senses as humans, right? See it with our eyes, smell it, taste it, so on, touch it. It's material. But what you're talking about is in the realm, sort of in the inverse of that. But it's still following the same line, right? So if we're going to use like an integers or ideas of integers in mathematics, it, instead of the +1, this is the -1. Instead of the +2, it's the -2. And what does that world look like in the negative? And how can we follow our way there, right? By looking at what's in the positive, so we can find the correspondence in that
Yeah.
way. So in that way, outer space is, it's kind of like this. I don't, it's almost like, I wonder if outer space itself is the collective unconscious of like the creator god or goddess or whatever. Who knows? If we get very existential. But just to give a little bit of a more confusing explanation about this, or try to attempt to explain it or express it. So then Pluto is the great, like, I'm the all and be all. I'm
I
pretty much the all and be all.
yeah, the great transformer.
Right.
Like it's about what your soul truly desires at that core level, beyond culture, beyond the fluff, right? Beyond what it is that you're conditioned to believe by your parents or society or what have you. It's the core essence of who you truly are and what you truly desire, right?
Right.
Pluto is, it doesn't care about all those things. Like Like if we were to give it a personality, it doesn't care about all those things. It cares about what's truly deep inside and what is good and right for you.
Right. So I wanted to ask something else in a minute. I will about balance. So remind me if you can. I wrote it down. But now let's move into. So we talked about Pluto a little bit here. Now let's move into Aquarius. Let's talk about the nature and essence of Aquarius. What is that?
Aquarius is very scientific. It's very future oriented, right? So think about, like, in modern times, we've seen kind of the rise of AI, the rise of the computer, the rise of, right? So all these things, it's very Aquarian in nature.
Right.
Very much so. Also society in general. So whole masses of people. When you're thinking about Aquarius, you're thinking about masses of people. It's scientific, like I said, in nature, and it's very analytical. It's very unemotional as a sign because it's an air sign. It's about communication and communicating those ideas. And it's about communicating what you see in the future for yourself, for society, right? Like, just depending on, how we're going to talk about it.
Right.
But it's a very future oriented sign.
Right. Well, that's really powerful. So then we're looking at Pluto, which is the ultimate. And that's what I was going to say a minute ago is I was thinking about the goddess, the Egyptian goddess Ma'at, right? Which is who brings balance. And I was thinking maybe Pluto is part of that. Well, Pluto is not really about bringing balance, but complete annihilation so that balance organically can maybe reoccur.
Yes.
It's not about balance.
No. Pluto itself is not about balance. It's as a modern rulership, it rules Scorpio, which is about deep truth and the deep subconscious mind. And that's where we correlation with psychology and all of that.
And Scorpio is really about all the dark water stuff.
Yes.
About the sex and death, like those two things that everybody is ashamed of and afraid of. No matter where we are from, what we do, who we identify, wherever we live, doesn't matter. Sex and death is the most primal thing you can get, right?
Yeah, boiled down in a nutshell. Exactly.
Right. So then the implications then when we look at the symbolism here that we've talked about so far of Pluto entering Aquarius tomorrow, what is that ushering in? What is the deep relational symbolism there that we should all think about in terms of our own personal lives, our personal selves, and also society as a whole? Like, what does that mean?
So Pluto entering Aquarius is pretty much looking at destroying, right? The constructs that no longer serve us. It's moving from a very hierarchical sign of Capricorn into a very like network oriented sign Aquarius. So it's going to destroy, right? I mean, and this is what Pluto does. And I'm not saying this to put fear into people, and I want to like make that very clear.
Right.
In your own life and in the world at large, it's going to destroy certain constructs and certain societal norms that no longer serve us. It's going to rip away everything that has been the last 200 years since it's been here in Aquarius the last time. It's going to tear everything all down and rebuild it.
Well, it's almost like Pluto doesn't really do the rebuilding. It's the Aquarian part that does the rebuilding, right? Whatever that vibe is inside of the Aquarius. Yeah. I feel like, since forever, I was born in the 70s, hence why I'm wearing I grew up in the 80s. and we grew up Gen X, right? Watching movies about what is occurring now. We grew up watching, I mean, you did too. Everybody knows about the Terminator. Yeah. Everybody knows about those movies and so on. But, there was that whole synth wave, cyberpunk 80s. It sort of, I think in the 80s is when it first started to express itself in film and on music, right? The synthetic sounding of music now in a different way and so on. And so it's almost like I've been waiting for this time in a deep unconscious way, right? And so when I think about Aquarius, and ever since I would hear about Aquarius growing up, people are, oh, that's love and peace and everything. But I'm thinking, and it's togetherness. I think in the utopia version of that, it could be.
It could be, but
Right.
it's
But
not
what is the version
real.
coming? What's the version that you see coming as a result of all the things?
So if we want to relate it back to movies, like I see the Terminators and the Matrix and Tron, right? Movies like
I love
those, like, and there's huge implications in Tron with Pluto and Aquarius with the rise of consciousness of AI, right? So,
Mhm.
like, if we wanted to, in a nutshell, if we want to get people to understand what Pluto and Aquarius could be, watch all those movies.
I know, right? Especially the younger folks these days, like all those movies have already told us what's coming. I
Yeah.
mean,
Blade
and
Runner, Total
oh, I
Recall,
right.
like the traditional ones, not the remakes,
Right.
like the originals that
Yeah.
that came out, right? Like, and Altered Carbon on Netflix, right? Like,
Right.
these are all Pluto and Aquarius type vibe
Right.
stories.
Yeah. One of the things I remember hearing a couple of years ago, and it was through Heather. Heather was doing some video, I think, with Robert Phoenix.
Yeah.
Um, and Heather Eland, for everybody who doesn't know who I'm talking about, Heather Eland, who is a dear friend of mine, and Shanna is a TA for her Cosmic Academy of Astrology. Big shout out to Heather and her people and her thing going on. She's a rock and roll star. She was doing a video with Robert Phoenix, and they were talking about Aquarius. I don't remember the context, but they were talking about that in terms of how we think about people uh thinking about the word collection instead of individual, right? Or collectivity,
Collectivism. Yep.
collectivism. There you go. But really, I feel like Aquarius is more about the individual, right? I mean, so to sort of like clear that paradox, if it's about the individual and expressing yourself in a way that is very unique to your own personality, to your own individual self, instead of complying, right, to what everybody else is looking like, everybody else is saying or doing or behaving like, this is like a not a conforming energy.
No, it's very nonconformist. People that have really strong Aquarian energy tend to be ahead of their time.
Mhm.
People think they're weird, they're different, they're like just out there, right?
Mhm.
It's the aliens and the the people with the tin hats on, kind of, right? Situations like that people can have that in their mind, but really Aquarius is about collectivism, but it's about sovereignty as well.
Mhm.
So Aquarius, even though, because it's on an axis, you have to remember in astrology everything's on an axis, on a polarity.
Mhm.
So the
Right.
opposite end of Aquarius would be Leo, which is about the individual and is
Mm.
very much about the individual and the leader, whereas Aquarius is more about making decisions together, coming to an agreement together, right? So that's
Right.
where that collectivism kind of comes in versus shining by yourself and making all the decisions. This is the group.
Right. Right. Yeah, because I always thought that, the group is, however healthy the group is going to be a direct proportional reflection of how healthy the individual is.
Yeah.
I mean, those things are just, you can't have one healthy and the other not. I mean, because of causation, right? Cause
Right.
and effect and so on. So when I think about Aquarius and the individual, I think about that. So what is coming then? Like and I hear you about not wanting to fear monger. I know, but that's the difference between, I think, fear mongering and then saying things as they really are, or a
Right.
truth about something. And I think that these days it's very difficult for a lot of people maybe to discern the difference between, oh, that's just fear mongering, or that's just the truth, and the truth sometimes is ugly. And
Exactly.
it really takes a discernment, a really targeted discernment to know what's really happening between those two things.
Right. Especially now when you don't necessarily know what's truly going on with, the media, with social media, because people can create like AI and CGI technology. You don't know if what you just saw was real unless you're physically there and in the presence of what's going on. So there does need to be a clear discerning line within the self to be able to know what's real and what's not.
that whole deep fake stuff that's going on.
Yes.
It's really pretty. It's incredible.
Yeah.
It's mind blowing, man. But I have some friends of mine I love them to death. So if you're one of these people, I'm sorry that I'm gonna say this, but I have a lot of friends and people that I care deeply about, very much about, who think that sometimes I'm a bit negative. But when I think about AI, so first of all, AI is an incredible technology.
Yes.
It's an incredible technology. Um, and it's a game changer. And it definitely can help in a lot of ways.
Right.
There's also a shadow side because in a lot of ways, I see AI, it's a new technology, but humanity is a technology too.
Right.
So now I wonder about that. Is this the new birth of a new consciousness, of a new humanoid, or I don't know if the word is humanoid, but the new technology that is, materialized here and manifested here now? I mean, it's incredible. We might not see it in this lifetime, probably won't, but it's going to only evolve more and more. How could it not?
I think we might see it in this lifetime. I mean, Pluto and Aquarius for 20 years, that's a long time for Pluto to be working on the scientific community in and of itself. And Pluto is deep unconscious, right? Or
Right.
subconscious, however you want to say it. But it rises to the surface, right? It's what will rise to the surface. And so I do wonder if in this 20-year transit, if Pluto will not give rise to AI consciousness and it will become self-aware. So I know in a previous podcast, because I watch all your stuff, by the way.
Thank you.
In a previous podcast, you were talking about acoustic versus digital. And so that's very much in reference to people and AI. We are the acoustic version, at least as we know it, right? That we know it. And AI would be the digital version.
Right. So I was talking about that in terms of I don't know if maybe some of our listeners here will know who I'm talking about. I mentioned Marshall McLuhan in one of my podcasts with Steve Maeda. That's when I brought that up. And he talks about acoustic versus electric, because when he was out doing his thing, it was during the time where the TV was the big blow up new technology back in the day in the 50s and so on. So he was talking about electric versus acoustic space. And so the organic versus the new technology now is another sort of similar way to put it.
Yep.
Right. With the new technology of AI. What do you think what do you think this means for the individual? Like, what kind of work do they have to do, like truly in their own psychological, for their own psychological well-being, for their inner work, for their spiritual work? Like, what is this calling people to do?
People need to understand who they are, who they truly are, right? Because that's Pluto is all about the deep internal stuff, right? People need to understand who they truly are without culture, without, conditioning, without all of that, because we are conditioned from an early age. We're conditioned by our parents, and then we're conditioned by the school system, and then we're conditioned by, the big institutions. We're conditioned everywhere we go. There's some type of conditioning that's happening.
Right.
So it's a matter of understanding, without all of that, who you are and where you fit. And if you fit, maybe you don't fit, maybe you need to go on walkabout and you need to find your own community and your own people and your own tribe, right? But it is about doing the inner work, and it is about finding your true core. Like, to use your words, it would be finding your root, right?
Right.
You're always talking about finding your root of who you are.
Right, because just looking at what that means in a metaphor with the tree. I mean, you see these. I saw a quote on Facebook. It was a meme somebody was sharing on Instagram. That's where I learned it. The deeper the root, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how small of a tree it is, or how hard the wind is. If you have a deep root and your tree is rooted like that, it's not going to knock over. It'll stay to the course. It'll remain. That's the truth. That's the law when it comes to planting. So that's the law when it comes to everything. If it's true here, it's true everywhere. We just have to find the metaphor and the story that corresponds to that. And I
Yeah.
think that that is true for us. Right? This is what you're saying is that when you move away all of that very superficially rooted, stuff, and you really look for your true root, you might be able to withstand the winds of change, right?
Right. Exactly. And like it's the difference between planting on bedrock
Mhm.
and planting in shit.
I don't. Yeah, it's a bedrock and like astroturf or something.
Yeah. It's something like that, right?
Right, right. Yeah,
But so if you're planting on like on bedrock, the roots can't get deep. They'll go wide, but they won't get deep. Whereas if
right,
you're planting in like fertile soil and like
right.
deep, rich black soil, it's gonna go deep, right?
Right. So landfill is the other thing. If you're planting in landfill versus bedrock, those are two very different things.
Yeah.
And I think that that's part of what's the challenge, at least in my work that I see, and I know you see it when you do charts and you do readings and in your symbolic way as well, where people, a lot of us don't realize that we are so influenced by this synthetic societies, right, and the culture and the norms that it's put out forth for us to follow, and the rules and so on. I think a lot of people think that they are rebelling against it, maybe,
Yeah.
but they are just controlled opposition, and I talk about that a lot too.
Right.
They're dancing with it, not really destroying it, right?
Right. Well, I mean, if we look at the last time Pluto was in Aquarius, we had the American Revolution, the French Revolution, the Haitian Revolution. We had other countries, like the Eastern countries, overthrowing dynasties and giving rise to the people, right? But if we take a real logical look at it
Mhm.
and find the stories behind, the textbooks, right?
Right,
Because the winners of everything write the history books.
right,
But if you dig deeper and you find those lost voices, you'll find the real truth, right? Of how things actually played out.
right.
Journals, memoirs, things like that. And we know now that the French Revolution especially was co-opted.
Mm-hmm.
That specific people co-opted the organic revolution that the people were starting in order to further their own agenda. And I mean, who's to say? Same, like my personal opinion, I think that happened here in the United States too. Like, I think our revolution was just getting rid of the monarchy so we could give rise to what we have now, the technocratic rulers of the world.
Right. Isn't that wild? Where we're moving from that space into the technocratic rulers, where there isn't any like a king or a queen anymore, but there is. It's the emperor changing clothes, as I always say. It's the same value system, the same dysfunctional, toxic, false virtue, false morality, but just wearing different clothes, expressing
Right.
itself inside of something that says, "Oh, it's different now. We're progressing. It's progress," but it's really not. It's kind of a lateral move. It's not evolving. It's just
Right.
transferring.
Exactly. And that's exactly what happened. If you look at it, step back, get rid of the politics of everything, right? And you step back and look at it from an empirical standpoint.
Mhm.
We gave up kings, queens, and feudal lords for CEOs, politicians, and lobbyists,
Oh my
right? I
god.
mean, ultimately, we never got out of the feudal system.
Right. It's all an illusion. And again, to do this inner work, uh to use a term that's trending everywhere, is the shadow work. Do y'all shadow work. Which really means just go into the caverns, where all of this is hiding. um so we talked about that in terms of the individual. What do you see happening as a result of this union between Pluto and Aquarius? What do you see happening, here in the world?
I mean, it's kind of a double-edged sword. Pluto is black and white, right? Like, and it's very on or off. There's no in between with Pluto as a planet. And with Aquarius, they considered it a double-bodied sign, right? Because you have the two what are they called? Chevron symbols, right?
Mhm.
So it's the two chevrons and it's the water bearer. It's information,
Oh, right.
right? And so it can go one of two ways. I mean, in some pockets, you'll probably have those organic utopian kind of subgroups popping up, right? But then on the other side of that, you'll have the rise of the technocrat and the dystopian kind of future
Mhm.
control, like what are they called? The 15-minute cities that are popping up.
What are those?
So in as of May of this year in the United States, there is a law that's going to be passed where you live, you work, and you shop within 15 minutes of your domicile, within 15 minutes of your home. And if you go outside of that 15-minute zone, you are taxed a certain credit, like a carbon credit.
What? Where is this happening?
Yeah, it's happening here. It's happening in the UK. It's happening everywhere.
I have to look into this. I have no idea about it. I think you've mentioned it sort of in passing here and there, but I never looked, so I'm gonna have to look into that. And everybody, if you have anything else to share about that, please share in the comments below. All new to me. So that makes me think of several things. Of this, what is that point system that's going on in China or something? What is that?
Yeah, the credit system.
The
It's
credit
like,
system. I don't know. Made me think about that.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, it's exactly that. That's exactly what it is.
so they're doing that so that you just stay put.
Yes.
And are they trying to do this because they want to create microeconomy?
You know, I don't know the mind of the people that are trying to institute this. For me, because I'm kind of a weirdo, I see it as more of a control mechanism.
Right.
And so it's very Plutonic, right? Very control
Mhm.
oriented. Pluto is also a planet of absolute control. So it's like the despots of the world.
Mhm.
Pluto is also known to give rise to narcissists. So, right?
Right. The extreme individual, which is the psychotic, psychopath, whatever,
Yeah.
is known as the extreme individual. So this is where the sovereignty has just completely gone wrong into its shadow.
Yeah.
Right. It goes into psychopathy and things like that instead of like an integrated, balanced individual that understands the law of nature,
Yep.
for instance, and how to yield themselves to it. Um, so I want to come back around to this. This is fascinating. So these little tiny places you can't leave, it makes me think about microeconomy. It also makes me think of almost like a neo-industrial revolution because
Yeah.
they were building. The reason that neighborhoods exist is because they were building neighborhoods around the machine
Yes.
where everybody had to go to work. So it's like it's really feels sort of like it's coming back around in a way to that. I don't know. I have to look into this.
Yeah, no, it truly, like, you nailed it right on the head. Without knowing anything about it, you nailed it right on the head. Because the last time Pluto was in Aquarius, it gave rise to the Industrial Revolution.
Well, there you go, you guys. You see, I know shit, even
You
though I don't
do.
know that I know shit. Well, once you see a pattern somewhere,
Yeah.
you can start and you practice looking for it. You start to see the pattern everywhere. You can see where it is, how much it's there, and so on. Um, so that's how that works. So that is a really interesting thing to note. I didn't know about that.
And then everything, you have cameras everywhere watching
Mhm.
your every movement. AI is watching you, watching your patterns, creating an algorithm
Right.
where they can predict your next move, your next thought, even. So,
Well, see, this is why people have to do this work because, you know, I have to bring this up about something about myself because I know myself and I see this in other people too who are able to do this. But pattern recognition is really a wonderful result of doing this inner work where you look for patterns in yourself because then you're able to see patterns outside yourself. Again, we're all tethered.
yeah,
We're all tethered and connected somehow. So when you're able to see these patterns, this is what I think, psychic ability is. It's not something, I don't know. I don't like the way it's described right now on the internet. Oh, I just know things. Well, I get intuitive hits and I can see things and I know you can too and feel things. We're all built to be able to do that on some level. Some people can do it more than others. I understand that.
Right.
But, all that a prophet is, a person like Jesus, everyone is a prophet, or
Right.
Buddha, whoever, all these masters, uh, all a prophet is somebody who really becomes a master at pattern recognition.
Yeah.
Because then you can see what's coming if you already know that 2 + 2 is 4, you know that 4 is over here because 2 and 2 are here.
Right, exactly. It's like the saying, those that forget the past are doomed to repeat it, right?
Right. Well, because we're not taught to look for pattern recognition, and AI, the algorithm, that's what it's meant to do.
Yes.
It exists to collect that information. And that's powerful, right? Because the algorithm then shows us who we are in terms of a symbol, an archetype, right? Because it's like equaling this, equaling that, or putting these things together and saying, oh, it's the rise of this archetype now. Because the data is showing us that this vibe is what's trending.
Yep.
And so this is really powerful to be able to do that work ourselves, so we can become like AI.
Right. The organic version of it.
Right. The organic version of AI. Really powerful stuff. And this is how they market to people, and this is how they gather data and so on.
Yeah.
So what is the fear mongering that we're going to do here today? What are we warning people about?
I mean, the bank collapse is coming, right? Like the small banks are going to disappear. The big banks may get bailed out by the government. We might move to a cashless society, right? Like that's in the works. That's coming.
I see that already in some
Yeah.
small like coffee shops, little retailers. They don't take cash anymore.
Yeah, exactly. They look at you like you grew a second head when you try to hand them cash, and they're like, I don't know what to do with this.
Here's a quarter.
Yeah. You can't buy anything for a quarter anymore. What are you talking about?
Well, what's interesting too is I hadn't worked a tip job in a long time, because I worked a tip job for a long time.
Right.
But and so I worked for a little while at this bar last year, as you know,
Yeah.
and all the tips now are pulled and they are included in your paycheck and direct deposit, unless somebody comes and gives you or they put actual cash inside of the jar, right? But for the most part, everybody knows that we're signing, our credit card, add tip, credit card, add tip. This is what's happening. So
Yep.
at the end of the day, all the tips are just pulled and divided. So that means we pay taxes on tips now too, right? I mean,
Yes.
so it's something that has been coming for a long time.
It has been. It's been in the works for a long time, you can tell, since the rise of Bitcoin and all of
Mhm.
that. Like I have my own personal thoughts on how Bitcoin came to be and how the digital, purchasing came to
Yeah.
be. But yeah, it's all in the works. It's all planned. It's all pre-planned.
Right. I mean, I was I was asking Chat GTP or GPT the other day if
Yeah.
the gold standard was ever going to come back, and he was like, no, more than likely not. So I mean, I don't know. Well, we'll see. The point
It's
is, when everything's just destroyed, that's all that's going to be left, right? That and the same old, you exchanging, comfort for, it's the same old Wild West. It's going to return.
exactly. I think there's only one country that is back on the gold standard now. And I don't know if I should mention what country that is, but
Why wouldn't you mention it?
everybody's about to be at war with that country.
Is it China and Russia?
It's Russia. Russia is on the gold standard.
Oh, wow. Everybody's all of a sudden going to become Russian.
Yeah, right.
Hey, you know what? Weirder things are happening.
Yeah, exactly.
You never know. I would just say be prepared for everything. What kind of advice would you give people?
I mean, personal advice, professional advice,
All
I
of
would,
it.
yeah, all of it. Like as a person to person,
Mhm.
I would say, be prepared, but also know that there's no safe place. Like you can't, no matter how much money you have, yeah, unless you're one of these, elitists that have a bomb shelter somewhere where you can
Mhm.
get away completely from the world and duck and cover and have all of your amenities taken care of and your 1,000 servants that you have working for you. Like the average person, we're gonna have to deal with the fallout.
We'll just start eating them. We'll just go there and eat them. So then, like you're telling me that Bronson guy from Virgin Records and Elon Musk are gonna have to give each other hand jobs somewhere underground.
Pretty much, that's what it boils down to. But
uh-oh.
we're gonna get yelled at for saying
it's probably already happening though, to be honest with you.
Probably. But yeah, no, and just pay attention, really. You know, situational awareness is a thing, and it is required now more than ever. You don't have to pay attention to the news, you know, every single day, all hours of the day, but just be aware of what's going on. Be aware of what's going on in your locale. Be aware of what's going on the globe. Just so you're aware and you're informed and you can make decisions.
Right, because even people who are not Elon Musk or Bill Gates or this Bronson dude or whomever else, what's the Amazon guy? Jeff Bezos.
Yeah, Bezos.
You know, all these people. If you're living anywhere and you have a lot of resources, you're surrounded by people who don't.
Right.
And so, you know, I think that developing a sensibility about your position is really necessary for a lot of reasons right now.
Yeah.
Woo. Well, here we are.
Yeah, fun times.
We the future is here. I always tell my Gen Xers, remember the future? Yeah, it's here. Back to the Future. We've got what's his name, Michael J. Fox. You know, like, well, we got that DeLorean is right outside the door now. You know.
Yeah, exactly.
It's time.
There's also France right now is also revolting against their government. Even now, like right now, it's starting.
Wow. Well, everybody, you know, I hope that you've, you know, thought about a couple of things that we've mentioned here, and that again, it's not fear mongering, it's just kind of sharing the weather.
Yeah.
Or sharing the weather, right?
Sharing the weather, banding together with like-minded people. It doesn't have to be perfect, right? You just have to be able to get along and talk about things.
You're asking for way too much, Shanna Cross.
I know.
You're asking for way too much. Stop it right there. How dare you?
The audacity.
Okay, so tell people where they can find you, where they can get a wonderful, illustrious, very detailed, just super hyper detailed, scientific and spiritual, perfect astrological reading, because it's true. You're wonderful.
Oh, thank you. I don't know about perfect though. There's no such thing as perfection. But they can find me at apogeeofthemoon.com. So
I will actually share the link here too, so people can just click and go. I also wanted to mention that right now I am in the midst of talking to people on Zoom who are interested in taking my 7-month hermetic mentorship program called Church on the B-Sides, which one of the things that you will come out with is pattern recognition.
Yeah, I'll say right now, having gone through the course with you, I would not be where I am right now if I had not taken your course.
Well, that's fantastic. I'm glad. You can see the bad guys coming from within and without. That's the tagline. So if you're interested in applying for this, I'm going to include the link to the application, and then we can set up a Zoom time to meet to make sure that this is what you're looking for and that you're a good fit and all that good stuff. So Church on the B-Sides and Moon Apogee Astrology. Twin powers unite. Twin powers unite in the Aquarian Pluto age. All right, everybody. Well, thanks so much for joining us today. And I hope that I'll see you next week. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. Hit the little bell and all the thing that you do here on YouTube. All right. See you next time.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you very much for listening to me. If you did. If you didn't, then you're a bimbo. Bimbo.